The acrid smoke rose from the ruins of what had once been Buenos Aires, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cracked viewport of the transport shuttle, watching her homeworld burn below. 3 years. 3 years since the resource wars had begun, and still no end in sight. "Captain, we're approaching the neutral zone," her pilot, Sergeant Kim, announced through the static-filled comm. "Australian coalition forces are maintaining their perimeter, but the Asian Federation scouts have been more aggressive lately." Elena nodded, not taking her eyes from the devastation below. Once green plains stretched endlessly, now scarred by impact craters and the skeletal remains of industrial complexes. The war had started over water rights in the drought-stricken regions, but it had quickly escalated into something far more devastating. When the climate finally collapsed entirely in 2157, taking most of the world's agricultural systems with it, desperation had turned neighbor against neighbor, continent against continent. "Any word from the European Union?" Elena asked, finally turning from the window. "Nothing new. They're still holed up in their underground cities, claiming neutrality while they sell weapons to both sides." Kim's voice carried the bitter exhaustion they all felt. "The African Alliance is requesting another shipment of medical supplies, but with the South American coalition cutting out production lines." Elena rubbed her temples. As one of the few remaining independent military units, her small force had been trying to maintain humanitarian corridors between the warring factions. But every day, their options grew more limited. Every day, more cities fell silent. The shuttle banked sharply as warning lights flashed red across the console. "Coalition fighters, bearing 270. Kim reported, his hands dancing across the controls. "They're not responding to our neutral codes." Through the viewport, Elena could see the sleek attack craft approaching. Black and silver, bearing the crossed hammers of the Australian coalition. Her heart sank as she recognized the formation pattern. Not an escort, a hunting pack. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Independent Relief Corps." She broadcast on all frequencies. "We are carrying medical supplies to civilian populations. Please acknowledge our neutral status." The response came in the form of missile locks painting their hull with targeting lasers. "They're not listening," Kim said grimly, pushing the engines to full power. "Hang on, Captain. This is going to get rough." As the first missiles streaked toward them, Elena closed her eyes and wondered if anyone, anywhere, was watching the human race tear itself apart. And if they were watching, did they even care? 300,000 kilometers above Earth's surface, they were indeed watching. The observation vessel Meridian's eye hung in the shadow of Luna, its crystalline hull reflecting no light, betraying no presence. For 7 Earth years, it had maintained its vigil, recording every battle, cataloging every atrocity, documenting the slow death of a species that had once shown such promise. Observer Zefka touched the bioneural interface with one of her 4 delicate appendages, feeling the ship's sensory array flow through her consciousness. She watched the small shuttle below dodge between missile trails, its lone occupants fighting desperately for a cause that seemed increasingly futile. "The degradation continues to accelerate," reported her companion, Observer Thanel. His mental voice carried undertones of what humans might recognize as sadness. "Atmospheric toxicity has increased by 12% in the past orbital cycle. Ocean acidity levels are approaching critical thresholds." Zefka extended her awareness deeper into the planet's biosphere, feeling the death throes of countless ecosystems. "The tipping point approaches. According to our models, total ecological collapse will occur within 2 Earth years at current rates. Perhaps it is time," Thanel suggested, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with uncertainty. "The Council of Meridia has debated intervention protocols for thousands of cycles. This species, they are destroying not just themselves, but their entire biosphere." Below them, Elena's shuttle finally escaped the coalition fighters by diving into a radiation storm generated by one of the war's nuclear exchanges. The small craft emerged battered but intact, continuing its hopeless mission to preserve life in a world determined to end it. "There are still those who choose compassion over conquest," Zefka observed, focusing her attention on the courageous humans below. Perhaps there is still hope. Thanos' patterns shifted to skeptical blue. The High Command has maintained the non-interference directive for millennia. What would you have us do? Reveal ourselves? Risk contamination of a developing species? Look at them, Zefka replied, her own bioluminescence pulsing with fierce determination. They are past the point of natural development. They have nuclear weapons, space travel, global communications. And they are using all of it to destroy themselves and their world. Is preserving our protocols worth watching an entire biosphere die? For long moments, the two observers contemplated the moral complexity of their position. The Meridian civilization had watched countless species rise and fall throughout the galaxy. Some transcended their violent origins and joined the community of space-faring peoples. Others, like the humans appeared to be doing, destroyed themselves in their adolescence. But few had taken their entire world down with them. I will request an emergency session of the High Council, Thanos finally decided. The situation here is unprecedented. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our ancient protocols. As the Meridian's eye began transmitting across the vast distances to their homeworld, Elena's shuttle limped toward the ruins of what had once been Melbourne, carrying hope in the form of medical supplies to people who had almost forgotten what hope meant. Dr. Sarachin knelt beside the makeshift hospital bed, checking the vital signs of a child who couldn't be more than 8 years old. The boy's parents had been killed in the latest bombing campaign, and shrapnel from an Australian coalition cluster bomb had torn through his abdomen. In the old world before the war, his injuries would have been easily treatable. Now, with medical supplies running critically low and no power for the surgical equipment, she was performing miracles with field kits and prayer. Doctor, we've got incoming wounded from the Harbor District, called Marcus, her lead nurse. The man's face was gaunt from malnutrition, like everyone else in the Melbourne neutral zone. Captain Vasquez's shuttle made it through with supplies, but the coalition forces hit the refugee camp during their escape. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back the despair that threatened to overwhelm her. 3 years ago, she had been working on cancer research at the University of Melbourne, developing treatments that could have saved millions of lives. Now she spent her days patching bullet wounds and treating radiation sickness, watching civilization crumble one patient at a time. How many? She asked, already moving toward the door. 14 critical, maybe 30 more with various injuries. And Doctor? Marcus hesitated. Captain Vasquez was hit. Looks like she caught shrapnel when her shuttle took fire. Sarah's heart clenched. Elena Vasquez had become more than just a supply runner over the past year. She had become a symbol of hope, proof that not everyone had abandoned their humanity to the war machine. If they lost her... The medical tent flaps burst open as stretchers began arriving. Sarah pushed her fears aside and fell into the rhythm that had kept her sane these past 3 years. Assess, prioritize, save who you can, mourn the ones you can't. Elena was conscious when they brought her in, her dark eyes alert despite the blood loss. Dr. Chin, she gasped, trying to sit up. The supplies, did they make it? Lie still, you stubborn woman, Sarah ordered, examining the jagged metal protruding from Elena's shoulder. Marcus, prep surgical suite 2. This one's going under the knife. Doctor, there's no power for the surgical equipment, Marcus reminded her quietly. Sarah looked around the tent at the dozens of wounded, at the child with the abdominal injuries who was still fighting for every breath, at the refugees who had been living on hopes and promises for too long. Then we do it old school, she decided. Get me every battery pack we have, jury-rig some lights, and find me the steadiest hands in this camp. We're going to save them all or die trying. As her team scrambled to prepare for surgery, Sarah caught Elena's hand. What's happening out there? Are we winning anything? Elena's laugh was bitter. Winning? We're all losing, Doctor. The coalition is fighting the Federation over the remains of Hong Kong. The European Union is selling weapons to both sides while hiding in their bunkers. The African Alliance is trying to establish a green zone around the Congo Basin, but they're running out of ammunition. She squeezed Sarah's hand weakly. And the rest of us are just trying to keep some small piece of humanity alive until this madness ends. It has to end, Sarah said firmly. It has to. Maybe, Elena replied, her eyes growing distant. Sometimes I look up at the stars and wonder if anyone out there is watching this. If they are, I hope they understand that not all of us wanted this war. Aboard the Meridian's Eye, observer Zefka was experiencing something her species called Calderon, a deep empathetic resonance with another being's suffering. As she monitored the communications from the Melbourne Medical Facility, she felt each of Sarah Chan's struggles as if they were her own. The High Council has agreed to an emergency session, Thanel reported, his biopatterns flickering with excitement. They will convene within one solar rotation. However, the preliminary discussions suggest significant resistance to intervention. Zefka pulled her awareness back from the planet's surface, trying to process the weight of what she had witnessed. Show me the extended projections again. The ship's bioneural network responded instantly, flooding both observers' consciousness with data streams. Climate models, ecological collapse timelines, population estimates, resource depletion curves, all painted the same picture. Humanity had perhaps 18 Earth months before crossing the point of no return. Even if they ended the war tomorrow, Thanel observed, the environmental damage is approaching irreversibility. Their atmospheric processors will need centuries to repair what they've destroyed in just 3 years. But they could do it, Zefka insisted. With assistance. With guidance. Their technology is primitive but their potential. She gestured toward the data streams showing human achievements, art, music, literature, scientific discoveries made in the face of impossible odds. Look at what they've accomplished even while destroying themselves. Thanel's patterns shifted to contemplative purple. The intervention protocols exist for good reason. Every time we've revealed ourselves to a developing species, the results have been catastrophic. They either worship us as gods or attempt to steal our technology for warfare. The Kalahari system is still a radiation-dead zone because we tried to help. This is different, Zefka argued. The humans have already demonstrated their capacity for self-destruction. Without intervention, they will die. With it. She paused, accessing the psychological profiles the ship had compiled on key human figures. Some of them, like the doctor and the captain we've been observing, they have the wisdom to understand. And the others? The warlords and demigods who started this conflict? Zefka was quiet for a long moment, watching as Sarah Chin performed surgery by battery-powered light, saving Elena Vasquez's life through skill and determination that bordered on the miraculous. Perhaps, she said finally, it is time to find out what humanity is truly capable of when given a choice between salvation and extinction. The message arrived at 0347 hours, Greenwich Mean Time, transmitted simultaneously to every functioning communications array on Earth. It bypassed military encryption, civilian networks, even hardened emergency frequencies, appearing on every screen, every radio, every device capable of receiving a signal. Elena Vasquez was in the recovery ward when the world changed forever. She had been awake despite the morphine derivatives, staring at the canvas ceiling of the medical tent and thinking about the futility of their small acts of compassion in the face of global annihilation. Her shoulder ached where Dr. Chen had removed the shrapnel, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the weight of watching her species destroy itself. Then the tent's emergency radio began broadcasting in a voice that was unmistakably human, yet somehow wrong, too melodious, too perfectly modulated, as if someone had taken the concept of human speech and refined it beyond natural possibility. People of Earth, the voice began. We have been watching. Elena struggled to sit up, ignoring the sharp protest from her wounded shoulder. Around the medical tent, she could hear other radios picking up the same transmission. Outside, she could hear people emerging from shelters, their voices rising in confusion and fear. My name is Zefka, and I speak for the civilization of Meridia. For 7 of your years we have observed your world from a distance, bound by ancient laws that forbid interference in the development of younger species. But as we watch your beautiful world dying, As we see your people destroying not only themselves but the very biosphere that sustains all life on your planet, we can no longer remain silent." Dr. Chen burst into the recovery area, her face pale with shock. "Elena, are you hearing this? The entire galaxy is probably hearing this," Elena replied, transfixed by the impossible reality of the moment. First contact. After decades of searching for signals from space, the aliens had found them instead. The voice continued, its tone carrying an undertone of profound sadness. "We understand that contact between our species will be difficult. We understand that many of you will fear us, will see us as invaders or conquerors. But we offer you something infinitely more valuable than conquest. We offer you hope." The transmission paused, and Elena could hear the sound of aircraft overhead. Military responses were already mobilizing, she realized. Humanity's first instinct, even in the face of salvation, would be to prepare for war. To demonstrate our peaceful intentions and our technological capabilities, we will now end the current military engagement in the Pacific Theater. Elena and Sarah exchanged glances. The Pacific Theater was where the Asian Federation and Australian coalition fleets had been locked in a devastating naval battle for the past 6 months, turning the ocean into a graveyard of warships and poisoning the waters with nuclear contamination. "Watch your eastern horizon," Zefka's voice instructed. Through the tent opening, Elena could see the pre-dawn sky beginning to lighten. Then, impossible to miss, a brilliant blue-white light pulsed across the heavens, lasting only a few seconds but visible even in the growing daylight. "The weapons systems of all military vessels in the Pacific engagement zone have been safely disabled," the voice announced. "Their crews are unharmed, but their ships are now incapable of warfare. Emergency rescue vessels are being dispatched to collect survivors from both sides." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. An alien civilization that could disable an entire fleet instantly, from space, without harming a single human life. The technological gap wasn't just significant, it was incomprehensible. "We propose a meeting," Zefka continued. "Representatives from each of your major political entities will be invited to a neutral location. There, we will present our offer of assistance and allow your leaders to decide whether humanity wishes to accept our help in healing your world." The transmission ended with coordinates, a point in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, equidistant from all major continents. For several minutes, Elena and Sarah sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of the moment sank in. Around them, the tent buzzed with activity as patients and staff tried to process what they had heard. "Do you think it's real?" Sarah finally asked. Elena thought about the precision of the transmission, the impossible technology that had disabled an entire fleet without casualties, the coordinates that spoke of careful planning and deep knowledge of human geography. "I think," she said slowly, "that everything just changed. In the control centers of every major military force on Earth, the response was immediate and predictable. Despite the aliens' demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority and their clear statement of peaceful intent, the first instinct of most military leaders was to treat this as a potential invasion. Within hours, submarine-launched ballistic missiles were being repositioned, space-based weapon platforms were being activated, and every nation's most classified defensive systems were being brought online. But aboard the Meridian's Eye, observers Zefka and Thanel watched these preparations with something approaching amusement. "They are remarkably consistent," Thanel observed, his biopattern showing what humans might recognize as wry humor. "Even when offered salvation, their first instinct is to reach for weapons. It's their nature," Zefka replied, though her pattern showed more sadness than amusement. "They are still very young as a species. Fear and aggression have served them well in their evolution. It's difficult to overcome millions of years of survival instinct. The High Council was not pleased with your unauthorized communication," Thanel reminded her. "The vote was very close. If this contact attempt fails, then we will have lost nothing more than we would have lost by inaction," Zefka finished. "But if it succeeds..." On the planet below, the coordinates she had transmitted were already becoming the focal point of unprecedented international cooperation. Despite decades of warfare and mistrust, The prospect of alien contact was forcing human leaders to work together for the first time in years. The meeting site is being prepared, Thanel reported, monitoring human communications. Preliminary diplomatic contacts suggest that representatives from all major factions will attend. Even the European Union? Even them. It seems the prospect of alien technology has overcome their isolationist policies. Zevka extended her awareness once more to the small medical facility in Melbourne, where Elena Vasquez was arguing with a hastily arrived government official about her right to attend the meeting as a representative of the Independent Relief Corps. She will be there, Zevka decided. Send a specific invitation to Captain Elena Vasquez and Dr. Sarachin. Their perspectives will be crucial for what we hope to accomplish. Is that wise? They are not political leaders or military commanders. No, Zevka agreed, watching as Elena finally convinced the official that her neutral status and humanitarian work qualified her to speak for Earth's civilian population. They are something far more valuable. They are human beings who have remained human despite everything their species has endured. As the Meridian's eye began its descent toward Earth's atmosphere, Zevka felt the weight of her civilization's hopes and fears. In 48 hours, they would either help humanity take its first step toward redemption, or witness the final confirmation that some species simply could not be saved. The fate of two worlds now hung in the balance. The artificial island materialized in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean like something from a dream. One moment, the assembled naval vessels from 6 different nations were staring at empty water. The next, a perfectly circular platform, 2 kilometers in diameter, rose from the depths with impossible grace. Elena stood on the deck of the neutral transport ship Harmony, watching the impossible structure breach the surface. The platform was constructed from some kind of translucent material that seemed to shift between blue and silver as the light struck it. At its center, a graceful spire rose 30 meters into the air, its surface covered with patterns that moved and flowed like living light. "It's beautiful," Dr. Chen whispered beside her. Sarah had accepted the alien invitation despite the protests of her medical colleagues, insisting that someone needed to represent the people who were actually trying to heal the world rather than destroy it. "It's terrifying," countered General Morrison, the American coalition's representative. The grizzled military man had been studying the structure through binoculars since it appeared. "Something that can create matter from nothing, the implications for warfare. Is that all you can think about?" Elena asked, her voice sharp with frustration. "We're potentially making contact with a civilization that could solve every crisis facing our planet, and your first thought is how to weaponize their technology?" Morrison lowered his binoculars and fixed Elena with a hard stare. "Captain, I've been fighting wars for 30 years. In my experience, there's no such thing as purely peaceful technology. Whatever these aliens want, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. Maybe that says more about humans than it does about aliens," Sarah observed quietly. As the transport ships from various factions approached the platform, Elena could see the careful choreography of power and mistrust that had defined human relations for decades. The European Union delegation kept their distance from both the Asian Federation and Australian coalition vessels. The African Alliance representatives maintained strict neutrality, while the South American coalition ships formed a defensive formation despite being invited to a peace conference. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the voice over the ship's intercom, "we are receiving docking instructions from the platform. Please prepare for disembarkation." The docking process was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Instead of mechanical connections or extending gangways, the platform simply welcomed their ship. The translucent material flowed upward, creating a seamless dock that perfectly matched their vessel's configuration. "How is that possible?" Sarah muttered as they walked across the impossible junction between ship and platform. "Advanced programmable matter," suggested Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese scientist who was part of the Asian Federation delegation. "Theoretical applications of nanotechnology and smart materials taken to their logical extreme." As the delegations gathered on the platform's surface, Elena was struck by the surreal nature of the moment. Representatives from nations that had been trying to annihilate each other for 3 years were now standing together, united by their shared humanity in the face of something infinitely greater than their petty conflicts. The platform's surface was warm beneath their feet despite the cool Atlantic breeze, and Elena noticed that the strange patterns in the translucent material seemed to pulse gently, almost like a heartbeat. At the center of the platform, the spire towered above them, its flowing patterns growing more complex as they approached. "Welcome," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We thank you for accepting our invitation." The air in front of the spire began to shimmer, and slowly, impossibly, a figure began to materialize. Elena had tried to imagine what an alien might look like, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of Zefka's appearance. The Meridian was tall and graceful, standing nearly 3 meters in height but so slender that she seemed almost ethereal. Her skin was translucent like the platform, shifting between pale blue and silver, and was covered with the same flowing patterns of light that decorated the spire. She had 4 arms, each ending in delicate, multi-jointed hands, and her face was humanoid enough to be recognizable as a face while being utterly alien in its proportions. But it was her eyes that struck Elena most profoundly. Large and multifaceted like a dragonfly's, they held an unmistakable intelligence and, somehow, compassion. "I am Zefka, observer of the Meridian civilization," the alien said, her voice carrying a musical quality that was beautiful and slightly unsettling. "I speak for my people in offering assistance to yours." The various human delegates stood in stunned silence for several moments before Premier Liu of the Asian Federation stepped forward. "Observer Zefka," he said, his English carefully formal. "On behalf of the Asian Federation, I thank you for this unprecedented meeting. However, I must ask, what do you want from us in return for this assistance?" Zefka's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Elena somehow interpreted as mild amusement. "A curious question, Premier Liu. What makes you assume we want anything?" "Nothing is free," General Morrison interjected bluntly. "In my experience, anyone offering help is looking for something in return. What are your terms?" "Our terms," Zefka replied, "are simple. Stop killing each other. Stop poisoning your world. Allow us to help you heal the damage you have done to your biosphere. In return, we ask only for the opportunity to watch your species grow into something worthy of the gift you have been given." "Gift?" asked Chancellor Weber of the European Union. "What gift?" Zefka gestured toward the vast ocean surrounding them, then up at the sky where the first stars were becoming visible in the gathering dusk. "Life, Chancellor Weber. Consciousness. The ability to create beauty, to love, to dream of futures that do not yet exist. Your species has developed language, art, music, mathematics, science, all the foundations necessary to join the community of space-faring civilizations. But first, you must learn to cherish what you have rather than destroying it." Elena found herself stepping forward before she had consciously decided to speak. "What you're offering, can you really heal the damage we've done? The climate collapse, the poisoned oceans, the radiation zones?" Zefka's large eyes focused on Elena with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. "Dr. Chin has told me much about your work, Captain Vasquez. Yes, we can reverse the environmental damage. Our technology can extract toxins from your atmosphere, neutralize radioactive contamination, even restore extinct species from genetic samples. But we cannot heal the damage your species has done to itself." "What do you mean?" asked President Okafor of the African Alliance. "Technology is not wisdom," Zefka explained. "We can give you the tools to repair your world, but we cannot force you to use them responsibly. We can eliminate the weapons that poison your planet, but we cannot eliminate the fear and hatred that create those weapons. That transformation must come from within your species." The human delegates exchanged glances, each calculating advantages and disadvantages, looking for angles and hidden agendas. Elena felt a surge of embarrassment at how predictably human they were all being. "You mentioned a community of space-faring civilizations," Dr. Tanaka said, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. "How many species?" "Currently, 47 civilizations participate in the Galactic Council," Zefka replied. Each achieved spaceflight without destroying their homeworld. Each learned to balance individual ambition with collective responsibility. Each earned their place among the stars by proving they could be trusted with power. And if we refuse your help? General Morrison asked. Zefka's patterns shifted to something that Elena interpreted as profound sadness. Then we will withdraw to a safe distance and bear witness to your final choice. We will record your achievements and preserve the memory of what humanity might have become. And then, when your world can no longer sustain life, we will mourn the loss of a species that showed such promise. The finality of those words settled over the gathering like a shroud. For the first time in years, Elena felt the full weight of humanity's situation. Not just the immediate crisis of war and environmental collapse, but the larger truth that they were being tested by forces far greater than themselves. How long do we have to decide? Elena asked. The environmental damage is accelerating exponentially, Zefka replied. According to our projections, you have perhaps 14 of your months before crossing the point of irreversible collapse. However, the decision to accept our assistance must be unanimous among your major political entities. We will not interfere in your world while you remain divided. Unanimous? President Chen of the South American Coalition sounded incredulous. You're asking nations that have been at war for 3 years to agree on something this momentous? I am asking human beings to choose whether they wish to continue existing, Zefka corrected gently. The choice, as always, is yours to make. As the meeting concluded and the various delegations prepared to return to their ships, Elena lingered on the platform. The alien structure would dissolve back into the ocean once they departed, leaving no trace except the memory of possibility. Captain Vasquez? Zefka called softly. Elena turned to find the meridian approaching, her movements flowing like water. You have questions. Why us? Elena asked. With 47 advanced civilizations out there, why risk everything to help a species that's been trying to destroy itself? Zefka was quiet for a long moment, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through colors Elena was beginning to recognize as contemplation. Because, she said finally, in all our observations of your species, we have seen something remarkable. Even in your darkest moments, even when hatred and fear dominate your leaders, there are always individuals like you and Dr. Chen who choose compassion over conquest. Who risk their lives to preserve life. Who maintain hope when hope seems impossible. That's not unique to humans, Elena protested. Perhaps not, Zefka agreed. But the combination of your creativity, your resilience, and your capacity for growth, it reminds us of ourselves when we were young. We nearly destroyed our own world before we learned wisdom. The only difference is that we had time to learn from our mistakes. Your species is running out of time. Elena nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what the meridian was offering. Will you stay? To help guide us through this transition? If your species chooses to accept our help, some of us will remain to assist in the healing process. But ultimately, humanity must find its own path to wisdom. We can provide tools and knowledge, but we cannot provide the will to use them constructively. As Elena's transport ship pulled away from the dissolving platform, she watched Zefka's graceful figure fade into the night. Above them, the stars shone with new meaning, not as distant lights in an empty universe, but as beacons marking the homes of civilizations that had passed this same test. Now it was humanity's turn to choose. The United Nations building in New York had been abandoned for 2 years, another casualty of the war that had consumed the world. But now, as representatives from every surviving government gathered in its restored assembly hall, the building seemed to pulse with renewed purpose. Elena sat in the observer's gallery, watching as humanity prepared to make the most important decision in its history. 6 weeks had passed since the meeting on the platform, and the intervening time had been a chaotic mixture of debate, negotiation, and barely contained panic. The reveal of alien contact had transformed the global political landscape overnight. Ceasefires had been declared on most fronts, not out of sudden enlightenment, but from the practical recognition that fighting each other while under extraterrestrial observation was strategically pointless. However, the old tensions and mistrust remained, now complicated by the prospect of alien technology, and the requirement for unanimous agreement. "The delegate from the European Union has the floor," announced Secretary General Martinez, who had been hastily recalled from retirement to oversee the proceedings. Chancellor Weber rose from his seat, his normally composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "Thank you, Secretary General. The European Union has carefully considered the Meridian proposal. While we appreciate the potential benefits of environmental restoration, we have significant concerns about the long-term implications of accepting assistance from a technologically superior civilization." Elena felt her heart sink. Over the past weeks, the European Union had emerged as the primary obstacle to unanimous agreement. Their leaders seemed convinced that accepting alien help would somehow compromise human independence and dignity. "Our analysis suggests," Weber continued, "that accepting Meridian intervention could create a dangerous dependency. What happens to human innovation and self-reliance if we become accustomed to alien solutions to our problems? What happens if they decide to withdraw their support?" From across the assembly hall, Premier Liu of the Asian Federation stood to respond. "Chancellor Weber, with respect, these philosophical concerns seem somewhat abstract when weighed against the concrete reality of environmental collapse. Our scientists estimate that we have less than a year before reaching the point of no return. The African Alliance concurs," President Okafor added. "Our agricultural systems are already beyond recovery without technological intervention. We cannot afford to prioritize philosophical purity over survival." Elena watched the familiar patterns of international politics reassert themselves even in the face of extinction. The same nationalist thinking that had driven humanity to war was now preventing them from accepting salvation. Dr. Chin, who was sitting beside Elena as part of the Independent Relief Corps delegation, leaned over to whisper, "It's incredible. Even now, they're more afraid of losing face than losing their planet." The debate continued for hours, rehashing the same arguments that had been circulating for weeks. The resource-depleted nations, the African Alliance, South American Coalition, and most of Asia, strongly supported accepting Meridian assistance. The technologically advanced European Union and parts of the North American Federation opposed it on grounds of sovereignty and independence. The military leaders remained split between those who saw alien technology as an opportunity and those who viewed any external influence as a threat. "Perhaps," suggested General Morrison during a brief recess, "we could negotiate a partial agreement. Accept environmental assistance while maintaining independence in other areas." Elena stood up from her observer's seat. "General, they've been watching us for 7 years. Do you really think they don't understand our political machinations? They're not offering us a menu to choose from. They're offering us a chance to prove we can act as a unified species." "And who appointed you spokesperson for the aliens?" Weber asked coldly. "The aliens did," Elena replied simply. "Along with Dr. Chin and several others. We're the ones who've been in direct communication with them while you've been arguing about sovereignty." This was true. In the weeks following the platform meeting, ZEFCA had established communication links with specific individuals across the globe, primarily people involved in humanitarian work, environmental restoration, or scientific research. Elena had found herself serving as an unofficial liaison between the Meridian observers and human governments. "What is their current position?" Secretary General Martinez asked. "Are they willing to negotiate modified terms?" Elena shook her head. "They've been very clear. Environmental intervention requires global cooperation. They won't help us heal the planet while we're still divided into competing factions. From their perspective, the same nationalism and tribalism that created this crisis would simply recreate it if they provided advanced technology to divided governments." "That's extortion," Weber protested. "No," Elena replied. "That's common sense. Would you give weapons to children who were using them to hurt each other?" The comparison clearly stung, but Elena was past caring about diplomatic niceties. Every day of delay brought them closer to the point where even alien technology might not be sufficient to save Earth's biosphere. As the session resumed, Dr. Yuki Tanaka requested permission to address the assembly. "If I may," she said, "I would like to share some recent findings from our communications with the Meridian observers. Elena felt a flutter of concern. Tanaka had been working with a small international group of scientists to analyze Meridian technology samples. Their conclusions had been unsettling. Our analysis of the materials provided by the Meridians suggests that their technology operates on principles we barely understand. Tanaka continued. Programmable matter at the molecular level, energy systems that appear to violate our understanding of thermodynamics, computational capabilities that exceed our theoretical limits. If they wish to conquer or control us, they could do so without any meaningful resistance from human technology. The assembly hall fell silent as the implications sank in. If the Meridians were capable of such technological superiority, why hadn't they simply imposed their will on humanity? This suggests, Tanaka continued, that their offer of assistance is genuine. They have no need for deception or manipulation when they possess such overwhelming advantages. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether we can trust them, but whether we can trust ourselves to use their gifts responsibly. Elena saw several delegates exchanging glances, and she recognized the moment when the momentum shifted. For the first time in weeks, the assembly seemed to be genuinely considering the possibility of agreement. I would like to propose a modified resolution, announced President Chen of the South American Coalition. Full acceptance of Meridian environmental assistance, coupled with the establishment of an international oversight committee to monitor the implementation process and ensure that no single nation gains unfair advantage from the technology transfer. Seconded. President Okafor responded immediately. One by one, the other delegations began indicating their support. Even the military leaders seemed convinced by Tanaka's analysis that resistance was futile and cooperation might be humanity's only viable option. Finally, all eyes turned to Chancellor Weber. The European Union's vote would determine humanity's future. Weber stood slowly, his face showing the weight of the decision. The European Union abstains. Chaos erupted in the assembly hall. Abstention was not agreement, and the Meridians had been clear about requiring unanimous consent. Chancellor, Elena called out, rising from her observer seat. You're condemning our entire species because you're afraid of losing political control. I am trying to preserve human dignity and independence, Weber replied firmly. We cannot simply surrender our autonomy to alien benefactors, no matter how benevolent they claim to be. Elena felt decades of diplomatic protocol crumbling in the face of species-level extinction. Dignity? She shouted. What dignity is there in dying because you're too proud to accept help? Before anyone could respond, the air in the center of the assembly hall began to shimmer. Gasps echoed through the chamber as Zefka materialized, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what Elena had learned to recognize as profound sadness. Forgive the intrusion, the Meridian said, her melodious voice carrying easily through the hall. But I felt it necessary to address a fundamental misunderstanding. Weber sat down heavily, clearly overwhelmed by the alien's sudden appearance. Chancellor Weber, Zefka continued, turning her large eyes toward the European delegate. You speak of preserving human dignity and independence. But consider, is there dignity in choosing extinction over cooperation? Is there independence in a lifeless world? We are not choosing extinction, Weber protested weakly. We are choosing to solve our problems without external intervention. In how much time? Zefka asked gently. Your environmental scientists agree that you have perhaps 10 months before irreversible collapse. Your political scientists estimate that achieving meaningful global cooperation could take decades. Do you see the mathematical impossibility of your position? The assembly hall fell silent as Weber struggled with the logic of their situation. Moreover, Zefka continued, you misunderstand what we offer. We do not seek to rule or control your species. We offer knowledge and temporary assistance while you learn to heal your world yourselves. Our goal is to help you become truly independent, not dependent on external aid, but capable of sustaining yourselves without destroying your planet. Elena watched Weber's face as the alien's words sank in. For the first time, she saw the Chancellor considering the possibility that accepting help might actually be the path to greater independence rather than less. What guarantees do we have? Weber asked quietly. That you won't use your technological advantages to influence our development? The same guarantee that prevents us from doing so now, Zefka replied. Our own nature. We are not a conquering species, Chancellor Weber. We are gardeners. We help civilizations grow, but we do not control how they choose to flourish. Weber was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the alien figure before him. Finally, he stood again. The European Union, he said slowly, votes to accept the Meridian proposal. The assembly hall erupted in cheers, applause, and not a few tears of relief. Elena felt the weight of 3 years of war and despair lifting from her shoulders as humanity finally chose survival over pride. But as she looked at Zefka's shifting patterns of light, Elena realized that this vote was not an ending, it was barely the beginning. The real test would come in the months and years ahead, as humanity learned whether it truly could transcend its violent past and earn its place among the stars.